let me introduce myself. I'm Karen Baldwin. I work with this regional project that is called Amazon 2.0. This will represent 6 countries in the Amazon basin: Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Suriname, and Guyana. And in this case, I'm part of the regional coordination team. It's in the regional office for South America, Latin America of IUCN. I'm glad that so many of you have joined us. Don't forget to say hello in the chat window. We want to know where you have joined us from, so to make this event as interactive as possible. I know it's hard from the distance, but we have some feeling of closeness through Zoom. Okay, having said that, welcome everyone. And after the logistics, we are going to have a first presentation. I'm sorry here. First presentation from Braulio Buendia. He's the regional coordinator of the project I just mentioned, Amazon 2.0. I forgot to say. It's sponsored by the EU. And we have other partners. I forgot to mention that. But we have some of the participants with us today. In the case of Colombia, Natura; Ecuador is Ecociencia; in Peru, Ecored; APA, and ACT. And IUCN in that country. So those are the representatives. I forgot to mention that. Okay, having said that, the first presentation is from Braulio. He's the coordinator of this initiative. 1 second, or the first one will focus on the strategies to strengthen the management of indigenous forests in response to COVID-19 effects. Um, and 1 second presentation from Jaime Nalvarte. He's the executive director of an NGO in Peru that is called AIDER. He's the chairperson of the Peruvian Committee of IUCN in Peru. He'll be telling us about the opportunities for economic reactivation and possibilities to finance management in indigenous territories. As you can see, they are very interesting topics and important in this context. So after the two presentations, we will have open time for QA. So that's what's important, that you type your questions in the icon I mentioned before, and that you may tell us who you want to ask, who should answer. And about 11:25, that's when we expect to close this session. I'll be presenting each one of them more formally. So first, let's start with Braulio's presentation. I'm going to read his biography very quickly. Braulio is a natural resource engineer. He holds a master's degree in forest resource conservation and also studies environmental projects. He has more than 20-year experience in administration, management, and control of forests in the public sector, as well as the private sector, indigenous communities in the Amazon. He's been a director and coordinator of projects in Peru and countries of the Amazon basin that have been financed by different funds from USAID, the European Union, the World Bank, and others. He's been an international consultant in forest governance and capacity empowerment, especially among indigenous peoples. He's been a manager of the monitoring indigenous forest monitoring systems in Peru and the replication in Latin American countries. And it's one of the key axes of this regional initiative that we call Amazon 2.0. He is currently the coordinator of this project and is present in 6 countries, as I said, and he's one of the components which has one of the components to create this platform, regional platform for indigenous monitoring. He's published several articles. That's it in brief. It's nice to work with Braulio day after day. So having said that, I open the floor to you, Braulio. Good morning, and thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure. I want to thank the Lord and thank you for joining us. And you know, it's a hard time, and I want to thank IUCN for this invitation. It's a long topic for discussion, and today we're going to try to tackle it more specifically. What we will be focusing on today is to answer some of the concerns that are going around many people's minds. Please tell me if you can see my screen. Yep, just say share. There it is. The impact and strategies to strengthen management of indigenous forests after the effects of COVID-19. This is a reality. Indigenous peoples have been excluded. They are in humanitarian crisis. We see how disconnected they are from the reality. They are socially excluded, and then they're paying with their lives. We're very hurt and moved, touched after seeing what happens minute after minute, and we are not prepared. Some of us think it's a structural issue, and that's the idea of this presentation. Why they are vulnerable? That's not coincidence. It's a big topic. We need to start thinking if we have to go back to normality, to normal life. So, why is there poverty in areas of richness? I'm not only going to touch on green stuff, but I want to touch on life and many things. There's been an alarm, and we have people's lives who those live in the forest and they live off the forest. And now, why is there poverty in areas of richness? We're talking about going back to normality after COVID-19. So, what kind of normality is this? Normality where the indigenous peoples were forgotten and excluded? That same reality we want to go back? Is that where we're going to go back? And we talk about economic reactivation. Were we ever active? It's an opportunity to think about this, to refund the system, refound in your wish. So when you start thinking about this, we need to look at reality. What's going on? We see there's no synchronization between reality and management. And we see issues, we find problems. They go bottom up, and the solutions start in the cities and they drop to the fields. There's an imperfection in the system. These are different views, different visions. For the Western world, the view of Amazon and indigenous peoples, these are vulnerable populations who are in categories B, C, E in the social hierarchy, and they have to have support. Let's say some sort of social compensation, if you wish. For them, it's something green, but for the indigenous people, they have a different view about the forest. For us, society, it's just a green side. An interest for many, Amazon and the forest, just forest mass, richness still to be explored. But others, for them, this is their home. Concepts. One thing is community monitoring, as we have conceived it, and a different thing is how they see it. So this will generally create contradictions and conflict at the same time because precisely the kind of imperfection between the connection of concepts and reality leads us to wrong conceptions. So I'm going to try to compare between a comparison between the Western view and the indigenous view. For the systems with- and traditional economic developments, the country is developed through growth, economic growth. That is development. Greater income, greater mobility, more finances, greater and greater indexes. But for the peoples, the concept of development means well-being, good living. It has to do with the environment, right? Good drink, good water, of course, water, and good food security. And this is all found in their territories. They find it there. So most likely, the traditional indexes of development are not compatible with them. So indigenous peoples are not tied to social programs or stuff like that. They respect and they want respect. They respect their territory. Territory for many of the countries is a space with borders and measures. It's flat. For the indigenous world, the view of territory is different. It has to do with their ancestors, their history, and it does not really match the Anglo-Saxon law. For indigenous brothers, the view of territory is 3D, the underground, the ground, history, air, everything in it. You could call it 3D, everything how you see it. It's not just the measurement, the border. So people live in the forest and off the forest. Anything we do in the forest, we impact them. It's that we take tractors there and log and then get some money for it. But that's not their case. That's their home. Another paradigm that we commonly define is the how we recognize ourselves, how we see the world. In the legal world, we talk about communities, net communities, but we give them a legal status, and they have a steering committee, steering committee, but it's not completely compatible with the world. But they because they have a different organization, they have a territory. They're organized as territory. They have an ancestral organization. Try to think. Try to picture this. Let's say that they have a presbytery, secretary, and treasurer. It's just an equal organization of a social club that we conceive with our governments and our countries had a president, secretary. Could they govern the territory? No. They have ministries, they have powers, institutions, uh, health, education, different ministries. And those are ways of organization. And that happens in each peoples in different ways. They have some browns, purata, the wise men, the elders. It's a different type of organization. It's a different type of structure that has lasted for generations. But we don't see that. We, the Western world, we don't see that. They may have it, but we don't recognize it. From 1,600 uh, communities in the region, how many people, treasurers who administer resources, know about it? Do they know how to add, track? Do they use a calculator? That's what I'm saying. So these ways of organization are not useful to us, or ours are not useful. Imagine our countries think our countries and presidents administering the countries with a board of directors. Okay, now let's talk about rights, collective rights. In the Western world, it's a collective right. Indigenous communities, they give them the property title, we recognize their territory, and I think their economy is social economy. That's all, it belongs to all of them. But in reality, the territory is collective, but the economies belong to families. The forest is collective, but no family buys the detergent, the health to other families, each one, and they could share fishing and hunt, but their economies are individual. That's why there's no one responsible for the whole forest. That's why the woodcutters come or the illegal mining companies come to exploit because after they don't work uh, freely because the indigenous peoples don't they work individually. Sometimes they get together. So this is a collective right, but the economy is individual based on families. Okay, or family based. So lack of connections. Speaking about public funding, public investment, public spending, the public expenditure in other countries have to with the greater population. The greater population, greater investment is required. That's why indigenous peoples, as minorities in big territories, they don't receive much public funds in basic issues such as health, education, transport. One of the workshops, I heard some invest indicators for them to have a pool of professionals. They will have to have 5,000 patients around or nurse. I mean, this population has 100 inhabitants, will never have a doctor, will never have a nurse. For them to have education, how many students do they need to have a classroom, to have transportation? At least 150 cars need to go by. So they will never have that because they don't have the number the population that is required because it's based on population density and not the amount of territory they occupy in their territory. And there is oil and there is industry in their territories, but look at the investment on the state. It's indirectly proportional. So then the illegal companies come or illegally come and they offer things and they let them exploit their land. Another key point is that the government recognizes the territory, they issue a document, a property title, and they own the land, but not the subsoil. And in the future, they don't know how they will ensure health education. And then we call them to a force project. We call them for prior consultation for before some investment without knowing that the basic things is to keep them, to keep the forest. That's what it is for them. So it's the other way around when you see the children, 12 to 3 years old, they are uh, drinking beverage called masato based on corn. It's, some kind of home. They have a very low defense system. They don't have health. They didn't have drinking water. You don't have the basic elements to be able to survive. You just and you've been forgotten. And then when years go by and the oil companies and gas companies want to come in, they call you and they say in 2 countries, I'm sorry, in 2 days, they ask you to evaluate the project in 2 days. So they are in disadvantage. When there's a remark, the report of a oil, there's a report of an oil spill. That's when the news come out. For example, how many helicopters, how many choppers do they have to go there? Many times they use the own companies, the company's own chopper get there. Speaking of transparency, equity, indigenous people, they come to inspect their activities. Is it fair to see that in the company's own private chopper? 80% of communities were sanctioned by illegal logging, but they've been sanctioned in 2 or 3 days, and they cannot defend themselves, and they've been summoned to respond for certain crimes against the environment, and because drug dealing, for example, illegal mining, illegal logging, or just logging takes advantage of the absence of the state to be able to camouflage in front of these vulnerabilities of indigenous peoples. So they need $250 of resources per month per family to be able to sustain. They get it illegally from the illegal traders. So the cost, the this relation of opportunity favors the illegal companies because they give them really to the indigenous. Okay, to give you an example, well, we move 1 kilometer in the cities, it costs half a dollar. However, in a community, 1 kilometer it costs $5, $10 because they need to navigate because there's no way, there are no roads, there's no mass transportation. It costs 5 or 10 times as much to move there. Richness distribution. In this case, investment. To give an example, in protected areas, it's actually little. The government should give more to preserve, but the peoples are uh, protectors. We have a debt to them. They have historically protected. They should uh, have enough funds. There's never been a constant program by the government to protect them, to pay to them. Ever since they started, all these years, generations, when they've received titles, property titles. So based on this historical debt, they should receive funds from tax companies. They should receive taxes, or do they have the right? Do they have the right to compensate? To be compensated? Yes, of course. And official data, finally, it's not right. Census, population census have never come there. They're not even visualized to receive benefits. They categorize as extreme poverty. And if they are not subject to receive a loan, they will never be able, they're not eligible to get a loan because they are called poor. They're not beneficiaries of social support. Many children are born and die without being even registered, recorded. Their birth was never recorded. If you go to registration offices, we need to realize how many are just distant. They're not there. How many cemeteries are there in indigenous peoples? Who keeps records of that? Births and deaths. So they live in constant oblivion. And probably we need to do some math here. But sometimes the figures. Give me an example. In the case of Peru, just one case, we say there's 22 million hectares, different categories. That's what the indigenous peoples have. These communities have at the national system of protected areas on the one hand. Out of those 75 areas, we have there are, I don't know how many million, 14 million in the Amazon. The source of finance for 2019, 2020 was about 95 million. So no sol is the currency in Peru. It's about $30 million more or less, almost $30 million per year to preserve 22 million hectares. So it's just a simple division. If for 22 million hectares, the state spends 95.3 million soles, how much is the state investing for these 22.3 million hectares of the indigenous peoples? 96 million per year, almost 96 that the state saves. I think he said almost $28 million with that amount of money. Is it okay to see everything that's happening in the indigenous peoples? They could self-finance if we recognize the debt we have towards them. And look here, 82% of these areas in deforestation, they're outside indigenous territories. More than 80% is outside their territories. So they are conserving, they are preserving. So it works with protected areas and their communities. They are doing a good job. So it's out of balance. This investment is totally out of balance. However, more than half of the force are national protected areas and indigenous territories. Having said all this, not all communities are the same. Sometimes we generalize them, but we need to understand their culture. They're not all the same. Some of them are close, some of them are more distant. So we don't always recognize good practice. Sometimes people do right things, but it's not recorded. It's not documented. We always see the bad results. Okay, right? Jaime will be speaking about good things. There are good things that are done right. It's not always wrong and wrong. We should have a social brand to highlight all this. What percent of territory is occupied by indigenous peoples to understand the rate or the proportion. Okay. How many schools are equipped? If you see now, who's working? How many of them have to leave the homes? Out of each 100 indigenous peoples, how many of them are professionals? The professionals who are currently there deciding for their communities may have had the chance to practice, to have a professional practice, to go there and work, and so that they can decide for their communities. And then in this part, I'm going to connect to the going back to normality. Are we going to go back to normality? Are we going to go back to the same thing I just described? This is an opportunity to reinvent, to refound the state. So, what normality are we talking about? And we're not going to activate what was never active. So, basic statistics, important data. Look at this. We have in the Amazon basin in our country 6.7 million hectares, 34 million inhabitants, high biodiversity, and we have 420 indigenous peoples in 3,344 indigenous territories occupying over 2 million square kilometers. And here we come to the emergency. To June 9th, when we knew of was confirmed cases in our countries of the Amazon basin. 234,000 confirmed cases with 9,578 deaths or casualties in the Amazon. And from here, indigenous people, 6,096 cases of confirmed cases and 629 casualties. Okay. So we are mourning, we feel grief, but what will be next? What is to come? They're completely vulnerable. We need to continue to experiment. The response capacity is just imagine a reality, and they continue dying day after day. Our indigenous brothers, and this is the crude statistics that it makes us think that in this ranking of these infections in the Amazon countries, well, we see Brazil is in the lead, followed by Peru, Bolivia, Colombia, and Ecuador, and indigenous peoples, same thing. And here Peru has 349 of them. Okay, followed by Brazil. Brazil is the Western population, but the indigenous peoples are still preserved a little bit more. There are fewer cases of infections, but Peru is ahead in this list of casualties. This is Repam is the source for last Tuesday, June 9th, just a few days ago. So I want to leave you with some reflection for change. We need to refound the system. We need to have a new approach of a different innovation strategy. We are failing at all levels. But we need to change our ship. Not only to say it, we need to make sure that these policies, is the performance rules may be verifiable and become effective. They are enforceable, and to sanction those who do not comply. The drive cannot be economic development. It has to be on the territory with the greatest riches is, and what the population is, how many pharmacies are supplied, or do we have in these areas where there is the extraction of uh, richnesses where the indigenous peoples inhabit. There's scarcity. That's what we see. Speaking of legislative power, we need to apply prior consultation before passing the law, not after it's been passed. Then we ask them what for. It has to be way before with more citizen control and citizen participation. We need to look at the kind of law or the use of royalties and distribution of richness when payment taxes. We need to generate conditions for comprehensive consultation on logistics. We're gonna, it's inclusive. We pay for the mobility, the expense allowance, and we take them to a hotel, 20 floors. They've never been to this kind of place before, and they don't share the culture. They're indigenous, and they just bring them together to a hotel, and that's not what it is about. This view of inclusion, participation needs to be renewed. Has to be informed consultation, qualified presence, decentralized presence of the state with the decision power on resources, not only to rely on some national governments. Now they're going through total improvisation. We need to reverse incongruencies of this lack of connection. We cannot keep going like this. Territorial rights need to be comprehensive. Also, assignment, use in both senses for sanctions, fines, and everything. The owner of the territory is the one that has to pay. That's not right. And those that exploit it, they just wash their hands. The granting of use of natural resources needs to be conceived within the indigenous economy. The logo one for all and all for one doesn't work here. We need to respect and validate their cultural organization, how they manage the territory. We don't need to bring knowledge from the seers. We need to exchange knowledge and wisdom. We are not superior. We're not higher than them. If we want to teach them to preserve, to take care for our future generations, well, they have some more to teach us. Maybe in the relation to the market, yes, or time to market. We can teach them, but for conservation, regarding conservation, they can teach us. I think that there's social service. It'd be nice, just as we see with doctors, those who do their social practice before their internship, any professional in social sciences in forest areas, they have the opportunity to do internship there in the forest with indigenous people, so social service, and then they can start to work so that they know, understand, so they have it in their hearts what it is that they're intending. Have a record of conditions and recognition of wise men, indigenous and leaders, indigenous wise men. We need to have a record of that. There can continue to be poverty in these areas of richness. So this leads us to a work agenda, a different type of work agenda. We need to approach this differently. There are many tasks internally and externally from the indigenous peoples. We, the government, civil society, cooperation, we need to reinvent this, a new focus, work on different indicators, comprehensive indicators. We need to reconvert this. And inside indigenous people, they also need to reflect, they need to work hard on transparency, work on their own empowerment, the social structures to be the leaders of this national organization. You need to be part of the community, but they never had access to education. So how can they do it? I know professionals have been able to go to college. How much do they go back to their communities to help in the decision making process, whether it's internal or external work that we need to do, and we cooperation. We need to work there to empower and improve capacity of the organization system. A new brand, if you wish, brand management. And finally, I'd like to end by without justice and without the Amazon, there's no life. There's no way for this. Let's rescue the ancestors' wisdom, as I've heard. He's speaking native language. Thank you very much. Thank you, Karen. Great. Thank you so much, Braulio. Thank you. Very interesting presentation and the analysis. One of the key points, well, we can not afford to see any more poverty in these areas of richness. We truly need to see a change, structural changes in the bottom, in the areas you mentioned. We are responsible, several of us, and we need to take action. Thank you very much, Braulio. Now we're going to move on to the next presentation. We thank everyone, all the participants who are asking their questions in the QA window. Right after the presentation, after Jaime's presentation, we will have time where we'll bring together some of your questions. We'll try to, as much as possible, answer most of them in the time that's been allowed. We will take notes of your contacts and questions in case some of them are not answered. Well, we'll still try to give you an answer through email after the webinar. We are reanalyzing the questions. We'll try to answer them after the two presentations. So thank you very much, Braulio. I'm gonna move on to the next presentation. Give me just a second, Jaime. I'm going to introduce you. That was the first one. Now the second one, called Opportunities for the Economic Reactivation and Possibilities to Finance Management in Indigenous Territories. The speaker is Jaime Nalvarte Armas. He's a forest engineer. He holds a specialization degree in strategic management of human resources. He holds a master's degree in forest specialty and forest resource management and PhD in sustainable development. He has wide experience in forest management and their sustainable development models, project conservation project formulation and evaluation, management of forest resources, participatory community systems, and he has held important positions full of publicly and privately. He's the one of the founders and CEO of the Association for uh, Social Development. I think she said he's a professor at the National University. He is the chairperson of the Peruvian Committee of IUCN, also member of the steering committee of for the promotion of protected areas in Peru, just among others. So welcome, Jaime. You have the floor. We'll listen to your presentation. We will be touching on several of these important topics of discussion today. Go ahead, Jaime. Well, very good morning to everyone. I want to especially thank the organizers. Thank you for inviting me. So I can tell you about AIDER experience. I want to congratulate Braulio for his presentation. When IDER was founded 33 years ago, I founded it. We had that view. It was together with a group of colleagues, forest engineers. We had that view to found this organization, but with the view of sustainable development of forest resources, because we thought that to work with forest resources, we know they're natural resources, and therefore these natural resources need to improve the quality of life of the people who live there. They live in the forest and they live off the forest, and that was always the view, the view we had, and the message that we wanted to convey. Precisely when Braulio says why we hold this kind of presentation or webinar for economic reactivation and possibilities to finance management in these territories in the context of COVID-19. We said, wow, it's wonderful. After this introduction by Braulio and his presentation, I think that we can talk about this Peruvian case and IDEA's experience. It was founded over 30 years ago. We've been acting for 30 years now, working for sustainable management of forests, biodiversity conservation, and the well-being of local communities in Peru. I'm sorry, I lost him. Of course, based on the principles of gender equity, interculturality, social inclusion, and participation. I can't hear him well. It's coming on and off. These are the pillars on which IDER was founded. That's our foundation for our work. It's our view. To indigenous peoples, Braulio has analyzed it deeply, and in Peru, indigenous peoples are not distant from this reality, what he described. We have education issues, health issues, work that we do, the forest engineers do, takes place in systems that are basically of social conflict. There's a lot of uncertainty, lack of safety, a lot of conflict because of deforestation and biosystem degradation affect their means of life. There's economic exclusion. We coexist with drug dealing, illegal mining. Actually, there is a whole bunch of issues. So we need to strengthen the indigenous economy because that's our priority. Food security, we need to improve their sustainable income and the green jobs, fair jobs, I mean. Here in the country, those of you who do not know, Peru uh, has 418,000 men and women who are indigenous, according to the last census. They live in the forest and they live over percent 2,700 native communities. There's social capital, of course, and cultural capital. There's 14 million hectares of native community forest according to the official figures. There's a lot of biodiversity, and there's patrimony there. About forest resources in native communities, 37% of the country's wood, based on the figures we've been given from 2019, they all come from the native communities. 37% of wood of the 77 million, more or less, of million hectares of forest, they come from native communities. Non-wood forest products, agriculture, and hydrobiological resources, biobusinesses. Let's not forget that this includes ecosystemic services such as forest conservation and community forest management. They contribute to the commitments. Uh, but degraded areas also are victim of production exploitation. Financing in indigenous territories, this is something broadly touched on. They're financially and economically excluded. There are way too many limitations here. They are economically excluded. Conventional services do not go there. The business models are not inclusive. They don't get there. There, he's back. I want to touch on two specific cases, as we'll see later. Is our experience to produce cacao in this region of Madre Dios in Peru, and forest management with indigenous populations in the Ucayali Native Community region. These are two projects, two opportunities of economic reactivation. If we focus on the experience of Madre Dios, this translates as God's mother. About some 10 years ago, AIDER, the institution, requested the National Reserve System the opportunity to administer these two areas. They're called Bawahan Sumene and Tambopata, so that we could co-administer these two areas together, so that we could look for financial opportunities for these areas, because there is a lot of pressure on these protected areas, and it was a big issue. The big issue is not the protected areas themselves, but the populations that live outside, and the communities in the buffering area. They see that they begin to generate income to protected areas. Pressure over protected areas will lessen. So IDER offers the Peruvian state to do this study, the carbon study of the protected area, and based on the forest card of the protected area, we can have productive projects in the buffering area. These productive projects, we can commercialize and generate income. Based on those income, we can generate finance biological monitoring and monitoring activities control to mitigate impact in these two protected areas. It's a surface of 573,230 hectares. This is a contract that I did propose to the Peruvian state. The state accepted it. It was an open bid, a public bid, and we have a 20-year contract. Let's see the results, how it moved, the progress. We conduct all the studies. You can see there, that's the data based on the carbon inventory, based on forest types. And this means design and flow. Agroforestal project to produce cacao and preserve biodiversity. So this financing model between an investment fund, that is Televiroa, together with IDER, Artelia Viroa and IDER, it's an information contract. It allows the financing of these two protected areas and guarantee sustainability of this administration contract, at the same time generate inclusive businesses in the buffering area. So this model has worked well, and we're going to see the results now. Throughout the years, we have over 1,200 hectares, 239 families that have benefited with this project. We have a cacao plant now. We have generated micro fauna corridors, some conservation agreements between cooperatives and these communities. We have licensing for the brands, and we have organic yield and products, crops. These 125 tons have been exported to Europe. Precisely yesterday, we received news of 50 tons more. And today, we are about to send to Europe. Actually, 50 tons was 125, that's 175 tons. That's our latest report that is being exported to Europe. So, amidst coronavirus, we have exported 50 tons more from this buffering area of Tambopata reservation area. Very important data because we have also avoided, you can see here, we have avoided deforesting 3,200 something hectares, more or less, if we hadn't done this work in this reservation. This experience was the first one for cacao uh, project. We received that award from Italy. It was an inclusive business, and we were able to challenge the president. We were taken to the government palace and said, "Look, Mr. President, we invite you to Mother of God to see what the reality is." In March this year, he joined us. Several people joined us. This right before the pandemic, and during that visit, we talked about the carbon fingerprint or footprint. Okay, I know that I don't have much time. I'm falling behind in time. Let's talk about the Community Forest Management, MBC, the acronym in Spanish, for sustainable development of native communities in the Peruvian Amazon. This is the Ucayali experience, the other protected area. In 1998, I think it was, with 1998, IDESEC, someone who'd been in the presidency, challenged us, as I did, to visit their communities in some peoples, because there was a lot of funds from international projects to work on proposals, but basically for forest management with peasant communities in a country, in Peru. And there was no cooperation, there was no work with native communities. And as a matter of fact, I did accepted this challenge, and we went there with Juan Chavez and other engineers who had been public servants in the forest ministry, and we went there for about 3 weeks to see the native communities in the Payali area, to see their experiences. And based on that, we were able to identify and come up with this together, IDESEC project management, a management project on community forest monitoring. That's how this project came up to be. And there were the milestones, how to work with indigenous peoples. It was very hard. It was a myth how to work with them. It was too hard, but we were able to make progress and to prove, to show that it was possible to do this work, this joint work. It was a challenge, of course, because there were different cultures, different languages. But in the end, that's a challenge that we like to take on, as I did. And we started that path. In 2003, for the first time, we had the forest plans approved. There was no legal framework. We even had to give the Forest Authority the guidelines based on this practical experience in the field so that they could have the elements. And that was the way it was built, how the history was built. And governance also within Peru for community forest management. Not only were they approved, the forest management plans were approved, but in 2005, we, for the first time, had this forest certificate in our country with purposes with the FSC standards, and that was the first certificate in Peru, and it was done with an indigenous people. Forest certificate that we still keep to this date. 15 years have gone by, and this certificate is enabled year after year. There have been 15 audits, international audits, and it's kept. Since this certification, this wood came from the forest and it was commercialized as fixed. It was assessed that we had to have some added value, so we generate some transformation process and a training center, and then we started a company with these native communities called Isnividi. The name it means one forest wonders. That's what it means in English, and it gives an added value to the wood forest, and not just the to create a company, but to get the custody chain in 2013. In 2014, for the first time, we sell in Peru the first public purchase of FCC standard, the folders. Received those folders of certified wood, but full furniture built by indigenous peoples. The only one is that the only public purchase in Peru, and there wasn't anymore. In 2016, for the first time, we exported wood, the liaison to the native community, and company from the Budovic group. In 2018, we had a partnership between USAID and RED, initiative, to look at forest carbon. This is the presentation by Aider. We have tried to picture it or portray it in a house, a hut. It's the graph we wanted to come up with to show our experience, how we have worked together with Indigenous brothers on community management. It's a sustainable development model for these communities. I'm not going to go in detail each little square, but it reflects the work done throughout these years. This proposal that we've built together with the communities. And actually, we just started showing it. It's news, the latest news, but it'll be material. It'll be subject to later analysis. But speaking of community forest management, this sustainable development model for these communities, we present several alternatives. Inclusive businesses based on sustainable use of resources and ecosystem services of the community forest. It's based on productive diversification. It means the use of wood and forest, not wood forest resources, agroforestry and forest plantations, fishing and fish culture, and handicrafts. Before we saw the forest and we saw wood, that was all. Today is a set of goods and services. Plus, businesses have grown through family and these communities to contribute to strengthening their territories and their management through territory surveillance and control, governance, and articulation with the state and the private sector. Okay, so use of non-wood forest products, sustainable use of wood forest in the community forests, handicrafts, just to name a few. as we've done in protected areas, because we understand that protected areas are inhabited by native communities, and especially in the buffering zone. Um, Here in this model, Ucayali and the communities for community forest management, the native community is the key role, is the access. The community uses their wood, right, to different models. They do surveillance control, and they distribute the benefits through their governance structures. It avoids and mitigates logging and non-sustainable practices of land use to avoid deforestation. They reduce CO emissions, CO2 emissions. They generate income, and that income precisely allows to benefit the community themselves. Oop. And it allows for the forest to continue being enforced. And this all happens because of proper forest management. This carbon um, cell is another a byproduct. It's not the main objective. So this model for climate financing is through Red Plus with the partnership with native communities, the private sector, and international cooperation. So where there is financing of 50% of each one of them, in this case, specifically speaking, the investment fund, Altelia Miroa, that's what the fund is called, and USAID as well. And this allows to add efforts, and when the community returns the investment of Altelia with the forest carbon, that carbon is commercialized, and it allows for the forest to continue being a forest, and the income or the profit to continue to benefit the communities through the agreements and their own governance. I lost them again. So there are some agreements there between the companies and the communities and the buyers, the needy community. Their social capital for territory management is a key for economic reactivation. Social capital in native communities, specifically in the hectares of the forest managed by the native communities. They need to be certified hectares, and the populations that live there in the forest and of the forest and the community forest management uh, model. The It's indigenous company and a community called Copacere. Their financially inclusive investment is a partnership between native communities and the private sector, between a partnership between the communities and public sector as well, through regional governments and local governments, National Service of Protected Areas and the Forest Service, and the partnerships with indigenous communities or indigenous organizations. But this is all possible because we have multi-stakeholders between international cooperation, Peruvian state, private public partnerships, private banking, investment banking, and what we have to do with all of them is to work with equality, work in a participatory manner, and to know how to negotiate. But they need to be fair businesses, especially to develop capabilities and capacities, capacity building with among the owners of the forest, the community, both men and women, so that they may know and they have the conditions, as Bradley put it, to be able to negotiate with all the stakeholders, and they are in the conditions to negotiate fairly in equity, and it's a win-win relation because we're talking about natural resources. It's renewable, and we want the forest to keep being forest. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jaime. Thank you. Very interesting experience. We had the pleasure to work together some years ago together with Aide in this region of San Martin. These experiences are all very interesting and necessary. So how to go after sustainable development through this kind of initiative, zero deforestation, but at the same time, it generates some income or profit to the communities that are keeping, maintaining those important ecosystems, and at the same time, their ecosystemic services that are key for a wider range of populations. So very interesting to see these experiences and initiatives and highlight this work, interinstitutional multi-stakeholder project. There's a bunch of questions. We thank you for them. So we're going to move on to this Q&A session. We've been reading some of the questions we haven't answered, as I said at first, all of them. We've just been reading the questions, and now we'll try to cover several of them. So I invite Braulio to please start your video so that we can have this open space. And we're now going to share the screen there. Jaime, you need to stop sharing your screen. Hold on a second. Give me a minute. They have been very interesting questions. Some of them are similar though. So we're trying to group them unless there are specific questions for each one of you. So first of all, one question that came up from Armando Chamorro, and it relates to other questions, is all this discussion now. What's the next new normality? What's the new normality? But also considering the socio current social economic model. The first question for both of you is, how do you think that we can approach or gap or bridge the gaps between inequality of our conditions and the indigenous people? So probably Braulio, you can answer first, and then Jaime. Thank you, Karen, everyone. Yes, I did read the questions carefully, and they relate to that. In the last part of the presentation, I talked about the reflection proposal, what to do. I think that a key point, a starting point of this inequality, of this map of the new reality, it's important to see where and what responsibility each one holds. To take our own blame, we, the state, everyone, our indigenous brothers, international cooperation, the private sector, and all stakeholders in a scenario of governance, and to be able to determine where we are going, how we can improve governance. And we need to look at principles and others. We cannot change the model right away. We need to establish priorities. We need to have external and internal defined agendas, as well as progress indicators and KPIs. How we move on from declaration to operation. It's an interesting challenge, I believe. Hyman has shown to us that it is possible. It can be done. Things can be done right, but we need to create the enabling conditions. Speaking of justice, opportunity, participation, right? The interculturality concept should not just be a right. It should be a way, a principle of governance, so that we can all understand well and we can all look at the same picture and take a step ahead. But I think in this model, where we are to reactivate, we have to think of this at different levels, community levels, national levels versus responsibilities, and at the same time prioritizing the short term, midterm, and long term. So we need to have constitutional reform, for example, the right to the ownership of land. It has a whole long history. It's not going to be easy, but there are also things, practical things that have to do with management instruments. It's to open an opportunity window for inclusive businesses. So we need to go step by step. The starting point is to have good picture and a plan of reconversion, to convert, to change. That would be the first thing, and I can add more if you wish. Thank you, Braudo. Go ahead, Jaime. Same question for you. Thank you for the question. I think we have to move on from discourse to practice. I think there's been a long discourse and little practice, and that happens at all levels. It's been proven that there are many pilot projects as well. Many pilot projects have proven to be effective, and a lot of governments have talked about escalating, replicating, but it's just theory, but it doesn't go into practice. And it's been proven with specific facts. How can it be that we have prepared Native communities, we have trained them, there's school mobility, certified wood, we prepare people, we train people so that they can have benefits, they're taught, and they buy only once from them to take a picture, and that's it. And in 14 million hectares in Peru, producing and indigenous people producing wood, and there's labor, there's wood, there's the resource, and there's knowledge. So what's missing? Why doesn't the government buy again from them? And sometimes we import wood, or we have to use other products different from wood to make folders. So I think we lack that. So that a way to bridge that gap is to get rid of private interests. That's one way to solve the problems. This model that we have shown, the Peruvian government has adopted this model because what is being done in this area called Mother of God is being done in other areas such as St. Martin or in other areas of Peru because it's proven results, preserving biodiversity without breaking or impacting objectives, but they are fulfilling, performing the roles, and the state is doing their job. That's what we have to keep doing. We've exported wood. The communities have been taught how to export wood, but nothing else has been done. There are no incentives. I mean, there's no encouragement for this kind of pilot projects, and with very little financing, by the way. I think that we could talk about this a lot more, and but that's the way to start to move from discourse to action. Okay, great. Thank you very much, both of you. Now we're going to another question, one for Braulio and then another one for Jaime, specifically each one of you. Mario, it was an interesting question about the Amazon Project 2.0. We don't know your last name. You can write to us, please. Basically, it's the Braulio, this project, Amazon 2.0, how you want to overcome these gaps that were discussed in the previous questions, both in the social cultural context, but in the other objectives, how to manage the Amazon forest properly. Go ahead, Braulio, and how you've done this participatory process with the stakeholders in the territory. Thank you for the question. Let's see. The project cannot solve a structural project problem of years, but it can contribute with specific facts. The project started from a hypothesis to contribute to the release or ease the threats or the pressure on forests. I think a big way to bridge the gaps is to bring together to a table with equal negotiating powers, empowered stakeholders to be able to interact among one another with one another when we create this space of consultation, how to take better advantage of the use, how to adapt to the game rules. 1,800 communities, 80% of those communities in their statutes, which is their constitution, if you want to call them, there was no one appointed as responsible for the forest. So there's a serious issue there. How can you do monitoring, management control if it's unclear at the community level who is responsible, who needs to deal with this and self-regulation? So we went after this. to improve governance from the community structure, at the community structure level, to have um, rules, clear rules, have technical teams to have use them as a technical support for indigenous decisions at the community level in their organization to be able to impact and make sure that these gaps are bridged. The relation to the market needs to be more fair, and the relation to the state needs to be more inclusive, and the indigenous peoples and the greater transparency, because there's corruption at all levels, of course, and we had to think how to work with them. We built capabilities through the monitoring program, and this model has been exported. These are not just observers, but they manage their forest. It's like they're in the forest or indigenous engineer, if you wish. Together with the project, they stay there, and they've been recognized by the state. In the case of Peru, the committees for control and surveillance is part of the system. We saw this. We had to institutionalize it and have qualified indigenous participation. Another strategy is to develop tools, tactical tools, what to do in case of a threat or pressure of technology based on evidence and capabilities. We have very proven cases. There's been intervention, and not only with wood, also for oil or wildlife. So better install capabilities, better install capacities so that indigenous peoples can govern themselves. And mm, finally, not individual example, to have a way of replicating this and show it at the state level. So the project has been very inclusive. It started in 2017 and it ends this year in 2020. But there's a long history since 2008 that we started in the Peruvian case. In other countries, they're already working. They've been working for a long time. In Colombia, there are people not only work with indigenous peoples, but also with peasant brothers and sisters. The Guarani peoples in Ecuador, they have different view. Brazil, they are inside a park between two indigenous Guianas, Suriname. They are talking about this, the right of land, the right to land. And we've been supervisors for these projects, and especially to monitor illegal mining. So it's a big spectrum of all kinds of examples. As all projects, well, not everything is perfect, but we've tried and we have tangible results to show. It's been proven, it's been recognized, they've been published, and they're part of a system. So they are warnings that come from geoforce in the case of Peru, and it was just there, the satellite. But the community monitoring programs, they take that information and they take action. In the case of Ecuador, not just it's not just control monitoring, but the alternative of sustainable economic activities through the women's group, the Nawa sisters. It's a similar experience to what I did. So there's also a Black Bone, the young platform, has to do with innovation, participation of new young indigenous peoples to capture the view and also a window of opportunity to this new horizon. I guess that's it. Thank you, Braulio. Here's a question for Jaime. Also, the question came from participants, and this applies not only to the to ideas, actions, but also something I believe we, several of the organizations that have been working this project in the environmental realm, actually has to do with projects. So this question has to do with sustainability and autonomy. So the question is, from these initiatives that you've been working on in the Peruvian Amazon, which have been the key actions to strengthen the autonomy of communities and peoples, and how you have worked with these strategies to ensure sustainability? I mean, I mean, the organization, the project stops working there. What will happen after that? If you can tell us a little bit more about that strategy. Okay. The strategy is the values with the community. Basically, transparency, participation, and association. Generate trust, build trust with these communities. This process, as I said, we started in 98. It was a win-win, and the communities opened their doors to IDER. That took some time. Once the community opens their doors, both men and women, and they let you in, you can join their assemblies, and they see that you don't let them down, they trust you. Actually, that is important. They trust your organization because your organization is not a project. That's the difference between a project and an organization. So the organization is in time, has a beginning and an end. We as IDER, in my case, you talk to the executive director and founding partner, like they said, it's face to face and someone they agree with and make agreements with and sign agreements and they are respected. Uh, Sometimes we don't have conflicts and sometimes there's no financing. Even without financing, we're able to remain there as an organization. What matters is to be stable throughout time with this indigenous population. So even without a project, without financing, we've been able to remain there in the community. I believe that's part of the sustainability, right? That we need to guarantee to communities. Because to talk about projects, to talk about community management, forest community management, it's not short term. These are proposals for the long run. Forest management, that's not done in 2 years or 3 years, right? You want to talk about a project for forest management, and if we want to talk about sustainability throughout time, we have to think about 20 years as we've seen it. In the case of Madre Dios, God's Mother, why have we seen results? Because they are a population. We guaranteed take assistance. We guaranteed training. We gave them credit. We're not giving away, but we guarantee product commercialization. They close the loop. We close the circle, and we guarantee everything. In the case of the communities in the Amazon, there was accompanying until the circle was closed, and we continued there. Now, it's not easy, of course. It's not simple, of course, not at all. That's why we have grown gray hairs in our heads, but it's been part of the challenge because we live in a difficult situation. We a lot of difficulties in the field. There are many adverse factors, but in spite of all that, and the amid coronavirus, many community members who had been in the cities have gone back to their communities today, and they have wanted to manage the forest because they feel safer in the forest. And they have learned some techniques to manage their own forests. This is learned activities. They have developed capabilities in them, and they have come back to their communities. They've been promoters of their own development. Whenever they have a question, they ask us through the phone or WhatsApp. A few questions, but the forest has not lost their dynamics. The community monitoring teams, they continue to work in the field. They continue to do their daily work. So I think that's important. And they feel safer. They have felt safer there. That's principles and values and sustainability throughout time of our organizations as well. Great. Thank you, Jaime. We have one last question for both of you. I'm sorry, let me find it here. So this question, basically, how do you see those, these scenarios that we have discussed and you have described in the ideal scenario for change? How do you see the role of organizations, environmental organizations after COVID? What are the deep changes that need to be made? Well, like I said before, this is a shared responsibility. We need to find ways to commit everyone, and everyone should take their own blame. The organizations are not no exception or cooperation. There's nothing perfect, but when you do something, you learn something out of it. So I believe that to be in this quarantine and isolation shows the nature. I mean, the message sometimes we don't need you. It shows the nature. Back to look how I recover. And we need to take responsibility. How much we spend so many trips, so many forums, meetings, right? How much do we spend? And how much gets to the field with specific things, as Jaime has shown, this wide range of things that they've done there in the field. Sometimes things are not done discussing. We environmental organizations need to be aware of that. The word hydro is for everything. We add it, but we need to reduce the amount of trips. These remote conditions are showing us the solution to many things. We talk about the ecological footprint, and then we need to rethink. We could say, okay, if nature recovers itself in a few months, there's no sense to attend trips. We need to admit that our discourse needs to change. We can keep being the same, go back to the same old thing. For example, to open the gap for economic regulation crisis, world markets, they show that in the coming months and years, it's going to take long to recover. One of the objectives of industrialized worlds is to accelerate production and consumption. And this comes from countries, producing countries in the south, in the Amazon. We have to be careful with releasing these safeguards and sustainability and low capacity to use resources and flexibilize everything because of the triumph of economic preparation recovery in countries. I see it, this implodes here in North America, but I see that the plan, reactivation plan, has to do with reducing costs, cost of structure, and the raw material. Where does it come from? So the countries don't have the association capacity to become a stakeholder to be able to produce and empower to have safeguard. It's not to say no, don't touch it, but how we tackle it. See, we don't take that into account, we'll be in trouble. So we need to look at our people, look the pandemic and other pandemics are start from the wildlife, so there's responsibility of public health and wildlife. We cannot blame China or the bats, right? This is a general thing. Many people say, don't buy a pet, don't take a parrot, don't buy a parrot, don't buy monkey. It's okay to stop wildlife trafficking, but economically speaking, the monkey, that parrot, what kind of vectors can it be bringing to the city? What can you bring into your home? So not just an issue of the Amazon, it's a structural issue of public health. We need to be aware what else will come. If this already happened, you can't just stay, by the way. It's not going to go. And the uh, capacity to associate these vectors can shed light. So we, NGOs, projects, we cannot just continue to see and just use the same speech. Great. Thank you, Braulio. And Jaime, same question. The advantage is that Braulio answers first, so he says everything. I agree with Braulio, of course. He's right. We need to be pragmatic. And I agree also that our lives have changed. We need to accept it. It's been almost 90 days here working amidst four walls, and we have adapted to this rhythm of telework. But I think life has taught us that the world does not come to an end, and it teaches us, and we need to determine the takeaways. The takeaways is to use the resources we have, use our time, optimize capabilities, the capabilities we'll have, the strengths we have, and to work as a team on something that I call the strategic alliances that goes through the willingness of people, the willingness of institutions, because we don't see one another, you know? We see through a screen, but we don't see one another physically. So I insist the issue of values, principles is something that countries such as mine, at least here in Peru, and a lot in Latin America, South America, we need to work on that trust, something we need to build, because unfortunately, corruption is rampant here, and it strikes us every time. We want to build a different country, but the news we see, they don't help. It doesn't help. The news doesn't help. We want to believe in our governors, politicians, but the news doesn't help. It hinders us. So that's hurtful and it frustrates, and that's hard. At the level of environmental organizations, well, definitely we've got to change our chip. Anyway, we need to move on from discourse to practice. That's what it is. I agree with Rowley. Pragmatism. So millions of discussions and spend millions and millions and little gets to the field. Millionaire products, I mean projects, but they don't get to the field. We have lessons learned. I think this event actually leaves a lot of takeaways from reflections. Definitely. Well, thank you very much, Jaime. And we have come to the end of this session. I have some announcements to make and then a few words from Jaime and Braulio, who will close visually. And on the one hand, we just shared in the chat. If you want to subscribe, this is the Amazon 2.0 project. There's a link. You can sign up and subscribe. We can send you further information. And we shared throughout this session the emails from Jaime and Braulio. So you can also contact them. To us, it's really important that, okay, this is not just an event, a virtual event today, Friday, June 12th, but it's actually a space where we can interact with you and with several of the efforts that are being made from other organizations, associations, indigenous peoples as well. So we are just sharing, I just shared, Gabi just shared the presentations, so you can download them from there. So I want to thank a lot, first of all participants, because if we don't have participants, we can't hold these events. So thank you very much, each one of you. And also special thanks to all our colleagues from IDER, and especially Jaime Nalvarte, who has joined us and his presentation, and Braulio, of course, who presented. And you have reflected, you have presented several topics that are really important. So that's from my side. Thank you so much. And then I want to leave Jaime for final remarks and then Braulio. Go ahead, Jaime. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Braulio. And thank you, everyone. Everyone who joined us, thank you for all these insights, a lot of experiences to build on, to make sure we reach our aim, our goal, because many people live in the forest and they live off the forest. Thank you, Jaime and Braulio. I want to thank the opportunity. There are many things for discussion, left for discussion. I want to thank Jaime. We've been in this together for many years. We have dreamed about many things together. I want to thank all the IDER family. It's been an organization, one of the few effective organizations, so that's good. Thank you. I want to thank IUCN, all the participants. You have the presentations. It'll always be a pleasure to talk to you. Let's remind ourselves that these difficult times, many brothers and sisters are losing their lives that go off. Last night I just saw in Aukajali, till 2 in the morning. They were looking for oxygen. 8 people passed away between 8 in the morning and 5 in the morning. The ambush people. Okay. I hope that one day this concept of second class citizen will be overreading, and we're all responsible here. So I think not all has been lost. There are good practices, there are good examples. Jaime has shown us how it's a possibility. Not just think of wood or carbon, but comprehensive management, how to impact the territory with good services. Thank you very much. Be good. Take care of yourselves. Thank you everyone for the logistics, and goodbye. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you and goodbye. Have a great day of rest of Friday. Thank you. Bye.